Okay, I'm going to keep this relatively short. Let's take a look here first of all. Here is the question that we have to answer here. What is this right here? This is the sunspot cycle since way back in the 1600s and back here in the 1700s. You see right here, right here, 1776, when my great-great-great-great-grandfather Ebenezer Bastardi was the chief forecaster for George Washington. See, you people didn't really know that. But I want to show you something here. We had a minimum, the Maunder minimum of sunspots back in the 1600s, and then we had a Dalton minimum back in the early part of the 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s. Now, here is the question. The global warming and the beginning of the industrial age and the warming that has really been taking place took place after this Dalton minimum. And the question you have to ask yourself is the cumulative low sunspot cycle here resulting in very cool temperatures across much of the Earth in the 1700s and early 1800s. And since then, because of obviously increased sunspot activity, is that the driver that has been leading temperatures up, up, up? And you got to ask yourself also, is the warming of the Earth that's taking place helping to drive industrialization? In other words, which is the chicken and which is the egg? Okay? And if you had a rooster, what do you crow about this? But the fact of the matter is, you can see that we had a lot of very, very low sunspot activity back here in the 1600s, 1700s, early 1800s. The Earth was cold. We've been pulling out of it ever since. So one could argue that it is the sunspot activity and the cumulative effect of low sunspots here and these two minimums that led to the warming that's been going on since the Little Ice Age. So we could get an answer to this mighty quickly. And my big argument is, you know, CO2 may be a player on the field. I understand the CO2 argument. See, people think that, oh, you're just dead against it. No, I'm not dead against it. Basically, the CO2 argument says that the Earth is a little bit warmer than what it should be, given all the best data we have. Why is that? If you take away all the other factors that we knew about before, and we have this new factor, maybe that's the factor to blame. Okay, CO2. However, we could get our answer very quickly here. You know why? Because if, as the Russians opined back in the early part of the 1990s, when Glasnost came out, a bunch of papers came out that a bunch of us read on the fact that solar cycle 24 wasn't going to be much and that we were going back into at least a Dalton minimum, okay? And then they predicted a little ice age to develop by 2030, 2040. We're going to get our answer, all right? Because if by 2030, 2040, we're not, you know, pretty cold, and hopefully it's not as cold as what they thought. They thought that we could go back to where we were in the early 1800s in the Victorian era over here, all right? Which means you'd have to wear a lot more clothing than you're wearing right now. Hopefully we don't get that cold. Then maybe CO2 doesn't have anything to do with it at all. You see, the interesting thing about me is I don't want to drive all this off the table. I just don't want all this nonsense going on that every single weather event is because of global warming. All right, that's just preposterous. You know, it's astounding. If you look at the history of the Earth, you can see much warmer climates, times when the climate was much warmer. For instance, did you know that back at the time of the Caesars, they were harvesting figs twice in Italy? All right. How did the Roman army get over the Alps? The Alps were snow-free for 9 months out of the year. They could just move those armies over the Alps. That's why they were up there fighting all the way into England. You saw the Vikings raising grapes on the north shore of Newfoundland back around 1100. Would you buy a winery on the north coast of Newfoundland right now? Of course you wouldn't. So you see these things going on. Anybody that's driven this wonderful country of ours, if you go through the lower Mississippi Valley, for instance, you see all that flat land, fertile soil. You know why? Because the Gulf of Mexico was all the way up to Cairo, Illinois. Because the Earth has been warmer without man, it can certainly be as warm with man. But that being said, we've got this going on. Now I want to show you, there's a lot of hysteria over the ice caps melting and everything else. And you see, this is what gets me pretty aggravated, all right? People yell about, there's not going to be any ice at the North Pole. Oh, is that so? Well, let's just take a look here. Do you know what this is? This is 1959, a U.S. submarine surfacing at the North Pole. Look, there's a lot of water around. There's some fog because it's quite warm. What's even more remarkable about this picture, okay, is not that there's no ice at the North Pole or just very scattered amounts of ice. It was in March after the Arctic winter. That there was, these guys, look, they're right here out on the deck. No, I'm not saying they're going to get sunburned out there or suntanned, but there's a case right there in front of you from the last time we went through this cycle that we're in now, all right, of it being actually warmer than what it is right now. And see, I think that if we were measuring temperatures the same way back in the 50s, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that we're measuring them now, we'd have a very, very different look at some things as far as what the actual temperature is compared to that time. But I'll tell you what, if you're all upset about there not being any ice at the North Pole, all right, rest assured it's happened before, because these pictures aren't lying right here. This is a U.S. Navy sub, March 17th, 1959, and that's what really gets to me, that it happened. They're up there, there's no ice after the Arctic winter. Wonder what the heck would happen today if something like that happened. And by the way, probably should happen. We're actually getting out of this warm cycle a little bit earlier. You know, global temperatures have been falling over the last 10 years. We showed you that in a video last week. It was on the O'Reilly factor the other night for you, all right? They've been falling because it got so darn warm before, but they have been falling contrary to the forecast over the last 10 years, all right? Not cherry picking the information. But the fact is, these temperatures were supposed to continue up. I suspect they've fallen because it got so warm. But the real fall is coming 10, 15 years down the road. It hasn't really started yet. By all rights, if we were to have repeated this particular cycle with the oceans, the PDO and the AMO both being warm like they were, we got the warm AMO now, the PDO is switching around, we should see something like this again. So people screaming, no ice at the North Pole, basically, they either don't know that this has happened, that's the first thing, or they do know and they're hiding it from you. I've got the pictures right here to prove it. All right? All right, that's enough for now. You enjoy the weather. It's the only weather you